Hello and welcome. This is going to be another Divine Partnership Coaching video. And in this one, I'm going to attempt to start answering some questions about 5D slash astral sexual encounters or tantric encounters. And I've gotten a few questions about them in my comments, and I've seen them also in other readers' comments, and there isn't a whole lot about it out there. So I'm going to preface this with this is a combination of a lot of nerdy reading about it. I have several Scorpio placements, and so tantric interests are certainly up there in terms of things that I like to learn about. And the other part is that a lot of this is my own experience, and it is partly the absurdities and beautiful bullshit that I like to believe. So take what resonates, toss out the rest, and keep doing your own research. And most importantly, learn to trust yourself. You know, the best thing that I can provide is my own experiences. And then, like, a lot of this journey, a lot of these twin flame journeys are about learning to trust yourself and not needing to have confirmation from others. That being said, we're humans, and it's nice to have shared experiences. So let's see if I could touch on this one. So there are a number of interesting things that can start happening, and especially when you start embracing the absurdities of having a twin flame connection that includes 5D experiences. And when you let yourself start to kind of play with that, especially if you get into, I just finished up step 14 on the path of the Empress stuff, talking about getting into embracing powers of imagination. Now, what you first have to recognize is the only thing you ever have control over in life is the meaning that you give to things. So take it like this. If you had an imaginary friend as a kid, you can either decide that it was real and it was a magical experience and you had an invisible friend that others couldn't see, or you could decide that it was hogwash that you made up because you were lonely and that it was just like a psychological blip in your life and blah blah blah. I don't know, that seems boring to me. I much prefer the invisible friends part. It fills my heart with glee, so I go with that, right? And I've spent a lot of time studying a vast number of spiritual beliefs and pursuits around the world. And what I've noticed is that those who have profound spiritual experiences and profound magical relationships, they believe in absurdities. They embrace them. So it's up to you on that. Now, one of my own experiences that I've had and that I've found that others have had, and boy, it sure made me feel better at very least that I wasn't alone in having them, is that you start to get visited by your twin flame in astral sense, and it shows up much in a similar way as it would when you were a kid and you had an invisible friend. And it's not quite the same as like a hallucination. Like you don't like I've never like looked over and been like, oh, my DM's like right there and I can touch them and do all this stuff. Like, no, it's not like that. It's an energetic being. It's an echo effectively of their physical presence. And it's sometimes it's his adult self, and sometimes it's his teenage self, and sometimes it's his inner child, and that was a freaky experience. There are some readers that do talk about that, and sometimes it's when you are very close to union, and sometimes it's actually when you're very far from union, and you're both thinking about each other a lot, and you're both in different states. And to be honest, I really would have just chalked it up to a very wild imagination on my own part if it weren't for several strange happenings and confirmations in conversations that I'd had with my DM that went, I don't think this is as bizarre as I may have thought it was. Now, along with that, especially when you get into practicing going into the 5D more intentionally, which I also talked about in step 14 of Path of the Empress, is that you might start to experience more dreams where you're getting physical with your masculine. You might be like out driving around or going grocery shopping, and suddenly you're getting all these like, heavy sexual thoughts about your masculine when you were thinking about how much to spend on a can of beans, or should I get celery or corn to go with dinner. Like it's like it'll happen in times when you least expect it and when it's very unusual to happen. Like, I mean, if you're sitting there and you're, intentionally imagining this stuff. It's not that it's not real, but you're manifesting that on purpose, right? You're thinking about that. But when it's when it comes in when you least expect it, when you're dreaming, when you're in that space where you're half awake and half asleep, when when you're going to the DMV to get a new license and you're like more worried about not sitting next to the smelly person that's like 2 seats over, or trying to like sit too close to the person who's snoring behind you because they've been waiting there for hours and hours. Like, when it's in the moments that you don't expect it that it is most likely that your twin flame is thinking about you in those ways. And in my experience, and what I've confirmed with others in my soul tribe, is that most often when you're getting these dreams and thoughts and things like that, either they are thinking of you intentionally in those ways, or they're having experiences that are causing them to think of you in those ways, or they likewise are also asleep and dreaming of you, and that's where their heart is going. That's where their 5D self is going. It's because their 5D self has never left you, and yours has never left theirs. Some people even believe that our 5D selves with our twins is actually the same being, but our 3D selves experience it we see it as them, just as they see it as us. And it presents an interesting thing too, because when other readers and coaches will talk about like removing your energy, that actually is one of the ways that you can do that. I still hold to what I said many videos ago, which is don't remove your energy, just redirect your energy, refocus on more joyful things, not even other joyful things. Just enjoy doing other things too, and don't put so much focus into it. But you can, and I'll do other videos about various like auric shields and energetic shields and things that you can do as an empath and stuff like that, to be able to kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like learning to play a guitar. Sometimes you just got to start pushing on the strings and finding the notes. And I mean, if you don't have a teacher, you just got to be willing to try it out, and experiment with it. And even if you do have a teacher, if you're not willing to play with it, you're not going to learn much about it. Now, the biggest question that I commonly see is, if I'm getting these dreams or these thoughts or these communications or these telepathic words, is my DM or my DF also thinking these things? Or is it just me? My opinion, my experience, yes. You reflect each other. If you're thinking about it, they're thinking about it. If they're thinking about it, you're thinking about it. And most especially, if you're getting these thoughts when you weren't anywhere in the midst of thinking about these things, explain to me where else that would come from. You know what I mean? I love psychology as much as I love spiritual pursuits. I'm a big nerd on both. I've had most of the counselors that I've been to see voluntarily have told me that I probably have enough accrued knowledge that if they had some sort of test that could be passed to get a degree early on, I probably could pass it fairly easily, just because I'm like that nerdy about it. I love human behavior. I love the various different crossovers, spiral dynamics, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, NLP, just all that stuff. So I don't discount it. And if there's like another explanation for it, by all means bring it up, because there are plenty of times that you are not anywhere in the vicinity of those thoughts and it'll come up. Or maybe you've even spent like a week and you've been enjoying yourself, and yeah, sure, you've thought about your twin flame here and there, but it's not really been a primary focus, and your thoughts have been anywhere but in the realms of like tantric thinking, and bam, then you're hit with like feelings in your body and these intense vivid visions and dreams of doing things with them. And one of the big things too, when you start to allow yourself to explore the 5D even more, is you'll start to notice that it's interesting trying to discern things in the ethereal realms, because it's always going to be on your mind, is like, am I creating this? Am I controlling this dream or this astral presence? And the answer is yes and no. But there are various ways that you can ask spirit to show you confirmations that you are that it's them that is wanting this or manifesting the vision that you're having and not you. And sometimes it's as simple as just asking that. And what I definitely recommend, and I'll do some videos on it later too, but there are plenty of other people who do videos on it, is um, find your benevolent spirit guides and have them be there and get to know them and build relationships with them that you can trust, so that when you start to get into 5D stuff, you have some sort of way of having a connection with spirit, which, to be honest, is much more important than a connection with your twin flame. And it's very difficult to really have discernment with what's going on in 5D versus psychologically going on, until you have a strong connection with spirit and with your benevolent ancestors who love you and your benevolent spirit guides who love you. And I definitely focus on, make sure you're calling in benevolent ancestors and stuff. You can get in trouble doing it in other ways, and you want to make sure that you're working for the highest good of yourself and everyone else involved, karmics included, and ancestors and spirit guides included, like every being involved in it, including just the universe in general. You want to work towards the highest good, towards love, and protect yourself in that way. Now, the other question I commonly see is, what should I do? Or, what should I do if my twin flame is thinking of me in these ways and they're in a karmic situationship? Like, should I cut it off? Should I stop it? Is that inappropriate? Well, only you can really decide. It really depends on what your morality is and where those lines cross over or don't cross over, and what your interactions with your DM or DF have been like up to this point. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there in terms of that. It's up to you on what you feel is right or wrong there, because this is a whole bunch of new gray area stuff. I think I more resonate with those that feel like it is inappropriate. I mean, astral or not astral, it is still energy. It is still an exchange. And if they are needing to learn lessons with other karmics and they're in the 3D, they are connecting with them in that way, and they are not connecting with you, then it is probably better that you redirect that energy elsewhere. Now, I'm also not going to say that it's wrong if you decide to allow it and indulge in it for a little while. My experience is that it's going to be a combination of both, and you're going to arrive at where you're comfortable with. You probably early on will more indulge in it because it feels like you're getting connection with your DM or DF, and for them it feels the same too. But you do also have to recognize that sometimes our twin flames will take that energy, and they oftentimes, there's usually one twin who is much more aware of this stuff, like you watching this, and the other twin is often not aware of it, at least not early on, and so they just think it's dreams. They don't realize what's going on. And oftentimes what happens, this is kind of funny, and it kind of answers the question of why are they thinking this. Most often, one of two things happens. If you're early on in your twin flame journey and you just met your twin flame, it's likely that they were either already in a karmic situationship, either they are married or they're with a long-term karmic, or there's something along those lines going on, or they had just met them at the same time. And when they met you, then that changed the paradigm. There's a whole lot of twin flame journeys where people will talk about the situationships they were in weren't healthy, but they were not disloyal, and they were trying to hold on to the relationship itself because they didn't want to feel disloyal. They didn't want to repeat those things, and then they meet their twin flame, and it totally flips the script. Now, if it's early on, what's likely going on is that they are finding themselves thinking about you when their karmic wants to interact with them in the ways that they would really like to be interacting with you, and it's really screwing them up in the head in a way. Like, they don't want to, much in the same way that you don't want to be interacting with your twin flame in the astral planes if they're in a karmic situation because it feels immoral. They also don't want to be thinking about somebody else other than the person they're with because it feels disloyal, right? So that creates a lot of big energy, and oftentimes they can't help it. Now, likewise, if you were in union with your twin flame and then you experienced separation and they rebounded into a karmic situationship, it's likely, especially being rebound energy, that they either got with somebody who is your complete opposite. This is called displacement, and you can look it up. It happens very commonly in rebounds. It's either somebody completely to your opposite, or it's somebody who is, at least for them, very much like you. Or they got with a karmic who's pretending to be like you, which also happens a lot too. And it's kind of fits in the same thing. If they usually don't intentionally look for somebody that's exactly like you. It's why it's displacement. That's a psychology term. But they're trying to recreate a new relationship that leaves off where yours was. And so, like, a lot of times you'll see something similar to, like, say, you and your twin flame were very close to getting married, or you were married and you were, like, leveling up, going to the next level. They got freaked out. You guys got into all sorts of big fights, and then they ran and they tried to get with somebody that is enough the same that they feel like they can displace that dissonance, that discomfort in their mind, and hopefully displace some of the pain in their heart by feeling like they can just pick up where they left off with you with somebody else. Now, either of those situations create incredible problems, because if they pick somebody completely to your opposite, then everything that that person does is going to be so opposite to you that it's going to remind them of you. At first, it's going to feel like a breath of fresh air, like, oh yeah, like my feminine would never have done that. This is totally opposite. This is nice. But then everything starts to be opposite, and it's discomforting because they clearly liked the way that you did things for a number of reasons, and by jumping into any rebound, it's going to get toxic fairly quickly. These are getting into a rebound at all is a sign of needing to heal attachment traumas. And we often think that we're going to be healed faster, or that we're not going to be running back to our last person if we jump into a new relationship. But it actually, one, it usually works to the opposite, and two, it ends up creating just a bigger mess. But like I said, if there was somebody who's completely to the opposite of you, at first it's going to feel like a breath of fresh air, and then it's going to feel crushing because everything they do is going to be opposite to you, including all the good and bad stuff, and that's going to remind them of you, especially if it's physically opposite. Like if you were a very attentive person and you very much enjoyed those interactions and you guys had a very strong sexual and tantric relationship, and they get with somebody who's like the complete opposite, who's more focused on, we got to do work, we got to worry about what people think, and like say they're the opposite way, and they're very the big shame cycles. They don't want to get into sexual stuff, things like that, which ironically a lot of twin flames, especially DMs, will end up manifesting because they don't really want to be with somebody else in those ways, but sometimes they either want to make you feel jealous, or because of how society trains men, oftentimes they will feel like that either that is love, or they'll feel like that's the way to keep themselves from going back to you, especially if you had a very strong physical connection. So then they end up with somebody that they really don't want to be doing stuff with physically anyways, but they feel like they need to, because then there'll be some sort of problems if they don't do it, but the person doesn't really want to do it, and they don't do it like you. And especially if they rebounded very quickly, like if they ghosted you, it's very likely that they rebounded very quickly and they're feeling ashamed of it, and they're also trying to figure out how to make that work with somebody that, even if it's like an ex from the past, they're still going to feel really freaking bizarre about it, and every time they interact with them, they're going to think about you, which is going to tear them up inside. And then likewise, if they end up with somebody who either is a lot like you or is pretending to be a lot like you, which it's amazing actually how often that happens, guess what? Everything that that karmic does is going to remind them of you. And most especially, here's the funny thing, somebody who just has a lot in common with you, who's just very much like you, they're they're already going to remind your twin flame a lot of you, especially in terms of physical interactions, just because they're naturally going to stumble upon doing a lot of the similar things that you did. That's going to cause your twin flame to think about you whenever they interact. The funny thing is, though, if they're pretending, sorry about that. I look forward to when I have an office space to be able to do these videos. Anyways, the funny thing is, if they're pretending to be like you, if they've studied you, or your DM or DF has told them a lot about you, like when they were feeling like they, okay. For example, I know that my DM and I were able to talk a lot more than any of his other relationships before me. And one of the things he tried to convince me of when he had left early on was that he had found somebody who totally accepted him for all of who he was. And that included like deep secret stuff and kink stuff and just all sorts of things. Now, part of me was hurt by that and kind of believed it, but mostly I didn't. Largely because the karmic that he got with was also an ex of his from many, many years before us. And I knew that he had explained that none of the karmics before me had that he'd been able to share things like that. So I knew it was a bit of BS. It was kind of cute though that it was like, oh, you're trying to pretend like this person is a lot like me. Then I also found out though that she was in many ways trying to pretend to be like me. Now, some of that was from lurking on me and watching me, and she had tried to connect with me and tried to be friendly before these interactions had happened, and I caught on to it and was like, no, we're not going to be friends. And I tried to warn my DM that she was trying to make a move, and he kind of believed it and kind of didn't. I don't know. He's adorably immature sometimes. In any case, I know that in his painful moments when he left early on and the drinking that went on, that he likely shared a whole number of things. So a combination of watching me and observing me and of hearing the kinds of things that he talked about that we did, I know that she tried to be very much like me. Now, the funny thing about that is that I can understand from earlier versions of me that I would think that that would be the way to get somebody to love you and want you want you more. The problem is though, one, in a twin flame relationship, you're talking about genuine love versus limerence, another good thing to look up. And the other thing is just the twin flame thing in general. And then you're also looking at how much time you've spent with someone and then jumping into a rebound where you still haven't processed any of the feelings or memories or things like that that happened with your person. So even more so when somebody is pretending to be like you, guess what? They're reminding your twin flame of you. Even more so. And that's part of why you get such big energy stuff going on. It's also part of why I coach people to, you don't have to do anything, especially if your twin flame is telling you how much the karmic is like you or better than you or different than you, or, especially if they're with a karmic who's very insecure. You don't have to do anything to get them back or to prevent them from enjoying the other part, the karmic. The karmic will do the work themselves, and so will your twin flame, because the whole point of it is learning lessons so that when you come back into union, you aren't so wrapped up in the shallow things, so that you guys can do missions that help create ripple effects that heal the rest of the world. Like, there are bigger, more important things. But even if it was just a simple relationship, you don't have to worry about it. If it's a rebound, it's a rebound. Work on yourself. Like, the more you work on yourself and you become a healthier version of you, then they're sitting there being reminded of you all the time. Like, you don't have to worry about it. And getting sexual dreams and tantric visions and communications like that is a confirmation of those things happening. And it's likely that you're then going to see confirmation in text or when you talk to your twin flame, to where they'll tell you like, man, they're doing this thing that like totally reminds me of you, or you do this thing that reminds me of them, things like that. It creates a lot of big energy. It creates a lot of things. And then as the karmic situationships start to go downhill, and usually a lot faster than your twin expected it to, because they usually weren't thinking that far ahead. They were in their ego and pain body and just jumping. But when it starts to go downhill more, and then either they start to withdraw from connections or their karmic does, or both, then they start to think about you even more. Like, they're lonely in that, and then they're usually trying to process the whole, well, do I just want them because I like the physical connection, or because I want the physical connection? I don't want to be with this person just because I want a physical connection. But they also often don't realize, as a lot of times those of you watching don't realize that a physical connection with your twin flame is very healing. You know, it's like the song, when I get that feeling, I want sexual healing. Yeah. Is it Marvin Gaye? I think it's Marvin Gaye. I like Ben Harper does a version of that too that I like very much. Um, but like we often don't realize that there is actual healing connection in that, which can complicate things because there might be times, especially on the DM end of things, that they might want to come and connect with you in those ways, but they're not mature enough and they haven't learned their karmic lessons enough to be able to offer a feminine more. And we as feminines are taught not to give up the cookie like that, and that's correct in most situations. But if you truly believe, or I was going to say not but and if you truly believe that this is your twin flame, you might actually consider having that connection with them. Just don't expect anything. Don't expect a huge emotional outburst. Don't expect commitment. Don't expect union to be there right away. Just go into it with a mindset of receiving and giving healing through a tantric connection. It is very good for your sacral chakra and things like that. And it can also help trigger some stuff around sexual shame that can help you both heal. So, I mean, and I'm not saying definitely do it. You know your situation, you know your stuff. Don't violate your own consent just because I'm suggesting it or anyone else suggests that it's different because it's your twin flame. And also look at where you are in your own emotional healing level. If you feel like that's going to break you and you don't feel like you can survive that break, then don't do it. Likewise, if you're getting astral connections in those forms and it's making you feel like crap, stop allowing them in. At least for right then and there. You can't